Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to explore those moments, those ideas that really truly shaped the world we live in.
That's right.
And today, we're going back to a really dynamic time in American history, a period when people, everyday folks and leaders, came together to tackle some really deep problems.
The kinds of challenges they face, they might sound surprisingly familiar when you think about issues we're grappling with right now.
Exactly. We're talking about the Progressive movement, roughly, let's say, 1890 to 1920.
Yep, that's the time frame.
And in this deep dive, we want to explore how this era, this progressive spirit, how it fundamentally reshaped American democracy, industry, society itself. It left a huge mark on the country you live in today.
Absolutely. Our mission here is to really immerse ourselves in the sources, the writings, the historical accounts to get a handle on the origins, the incredibly varied goals, and of course, the lasting impact.
We're looking for those surprising connections, right? The facts that make you go, okay, now I get it.
That aha moment. We'll touch on everything from, say, the intense fight for women's suffrage to how the actual food on your table got significantly safer. Believe it or not.
It was such a broad movement, wasn't it? From, grassroots activists working locally all the way up to presidents taking major action.
A huge spectrum.
And the aim, pretty ambitious, to perfect democracy, improve efficiency, push for social justice.
Yeah, big goals.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. Where do we begin? Every big movement needs a spark, right?
Definitely. And for the progressives, that initial spark, you could argue, came from a group called the muckrakers.
Muckrakers. Now, these weren't just reporters chasing headlines.
No, they were different. These were investigative journalists, writers who really dug deep to expose, the muck, the uncomfortable truths about society at the time.
And the name itself is interesting, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It actually came from President Theodore Roosevelt. He invoked this character from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, someone obsessed with raking filth.
So it wasn't meant as a compliment initially?
Not at all. It was kind of disparaging. But the journalists, they totally embraced it, wore it like a badge of honor.
And their work had real impact, like Jacob Riis, right? With How the Other Half Lives.
Groundbreaking stuff. That was 1890. He used photojournalism pretty new then to show the awful living conditions in New York's tenements. Those images of kids sleeping on the street. Powerful.
Unforgettable. And Ida Tarbell.
Maybe the most famous female muckraker. She took on John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil, just laid bare the monopoly's ruthless tactics in a series of articles.
And there were others too, focusing on politics, labor.
Oh, yeah. Lincoln Steffens investigated corruption in city governments. Ray Stannard Baker looked into dangerous conditions and low pay in coal mines.
So they're publishing in magazines like McClure's, getting this information out widely.
And what's fascinating here is how their work did more than just reveal problems like child labor or corporate greed. It really agitated for change, often successfully.
It forced people to confront things they might have preferred to ignore.
It built this national conscience. You couldn't just look away anymore. These weren't abstract problems. They were moral issues demanding action.
So what does this all mean? It means that public awareness, getting these truths out there, was the essential first step.
It was the catalyst. It really lit the fire under the broader progressive movement.
Okay, so awareness is building. What about action? One of the big ideas the progressives had was about perfecting democracy, right? Giving people more control.
That was central. And it wasn't just talk. It led to concrete changes, especially at the state level, that you still see today.
Like what kind of changes?
Well, things like the direct primary. Before that, party bosses often picked candidates in back rooms. The direct primary let party members vote for who would run.
Okay, so more power to the voters.
Then there's the initiative. This allowed voters to actually propose laws themselves by getting signatures on a petition, put an idea right on the ballot.
Wow, direct lawmaking.
And the flip side was the referendum, which let voters approve or reject laws that the legislature had already passed.
Giving voters a veto power, essentially.
Sort of, yeah. And then, less common but pretty powerful, the recall. This allowed citizens to vote to remove an elected official from office before their term was up.
These sound like huge shifts in power. Did they catch on?
They really did.
Yeah.
States across the country adopted these measures pretty quickly. South Dakota, Oregon, many others pioneered them. They fundamentally changed the relationship between citizens and their state governments. They changed how you interact with government.
And did this push for direct democracy reach the federal level?
It absolutely did. The big one was the 17th Amendment to the Constitution.
Ah, the direct election of senators.
That's the one. Before that, state legislatures chose U.S. senators. The 17th Amendment put that power directly in the hands of the voters in each state. A major, major change championed by people like William Jennings Bryan.
So when you vote for your senators today,
you're exercising a right won during the Progressive era. These aren't just, historical footnotes. They're fundamental parts of how American democracy works now.
okay, so perfecting democracy was one pillar. What about efficiency and corruption? That was a big target too, wasn't it? Especially things like Tammany Hall in New York.
Oh, definitely. Battling inefficiency, waste, and outright graft in government, particularly in cities run by political machines, was a huge focus.
And they came up with some clever solutions, didn't they?
Really ingenious reforms at the city level. Take Galveston, Texas. After this absolutely devastating hurricane in 1900, just wiped the place out.
Terrible tragedy.
Awful. Over 8,000 lives lost. The existing city government just couldn't cope. So they implemented something new, a commission system.
How did that work?
Basically, they elected commissioners, and each one was responsible for a specific city department: water, fire, police, that sort of thing. It really cut down on corruption and inefficiency.
And that model spread.
Widely used, even today. Then you had Staunton, Virginia, around 1908. They tried something different, the city manager system.
City manager. How's that different?
The elected city council hires a professional, non-political expert, maybe an engineer, a business manager, to run the day-to-day operations of the city. The idea is expertise over politics for city management.
And that caught on too.
Massively. Thousands of cities, including big ones like Dallas, Austin, Phoenix, use that system now. It shows that progressive focus on expertise.
And that idea of using experts wasn't just in cities, right? You mentioned Robert La Follette in Wisconsin.
Fighting Bob La Follette. Yeah, his Wisconsin idea was all about bringing expertise into state government. He hired university professors and other specialists to research issues and help draft legislation.
And that led to real reforms.
Big ones. Wisconsin got the first effective workmen's compensation system, a minimum wage law, progressive taxes. He was really ahead of his time on many things, including pushing for women's suffrage.
So expertise was key. Does that connect to changes in industry too? I'm thinking of Taylorism.
It does, though maybe in a more controversial way. Frederick Winslow Taylor's scientific management, or Taylorism.
Time, motion studies, and all that.
The Principles of Scientific Management, his book from 1911. He argued you could find the one best way to do any job through careful study and standardization, break tasks down, make workers hyper-specialized.
Sounds efficient, maybe, but maybe not great for the workers.
That was the tension. It definitely aimed for efficiency, which fit the progressive mindset, but it also stripped workers of autonomy, treated them almost like parts in a machine. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights that progressive faith in science and experts, even when it created friction.
Okay, so we've seen reforms in democracy, government efficiency. But the progressives were also driven by social justice concerns, weren't they? Addressing inequality, difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. A huge part of the movement was focused on protecting vulnerable populations, especially children and workers.
Child labor was a massive issue then.
Staggering. The National Child Labor Committee, the NCLC, formed in 1904 to fight it. Census figures from 1900 showed about 1 in every 6 kids between 5 and 10 was working.
1 in 6. That's hard to imagine.
And the work was often dangerous, grueling. Photographer Lewis Hine did this incredible decade-long campaign documenting it, his photos.
Like Addie Card, the young spinner.
Yes, her picture is heartbreaking, 12 years old. Or those young boys working 10, 12-hour shifts in textile mills around huge, dangerous machines. Hine's photos made the problem impossible to ignore.
Did they succeed in banning child labor then?
It was a long fight. They helped create the U.S. Children's Bureau in 1912 and got the Keating-Owen Act passed in 1916, but the Supreme Court struck that down. The real federal ban didn't come until the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, but the NCLC laid all the groundwork.
And what about safety for adult workers, especially women in factories?
Florence Kelley was a key fish there, head of the National Consumers League. She fought against sweatshops, pushed for things like an 8-hour workday law for women who were often horribly exploited.
And then came the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire.
March 25, 1911. Just a horrific, pivotal moment.
What happened exactly?
It was a garment factory in New York City. A fire broke out, and, well, the managers had locked many of the exit doors and fire escapes to prevent theft or unauthorized breaks, they said.
They locked the doors.
Yeah. So 146 workers, mostly young immigrant women, were trapped. They died either in the fire or by jumping from the windows.
Oh, my God.
There are these chilling eyewitness accounts. A reporter, William Shepard, described hearing the bodies hit the pavement. The dead, the dead. He saw a fire hose, water running red in the gutter. Just unimaginable.
That must have caused outrage.
It absolutely turned the tide of public opinion. That single tragedy gave reformers like Kelly and the National Consumers League the undeniable moral argument they needed. Politicians couldn't ignore it anymore. It led directly to sweeping new workplace safety laws, fire codes, building regulations, things we take for granted now.
A terrible catalyst, but a catalyst nonetheless. And there's one more big social justice issue tied to this era: prohibition.
Right. You had groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the WCTU, and the Anti-Saloon League. They very effectively framed alcohol as both a moral failing and a practical problem.
How so?
They argued it destroyed families, led to poverty, workplace accidents, violence. They tied temperance directly to progressive ideals of improving society, protecting homes, often linking it to Christian morality.
And they were successful.
Incredibly. Their relentless campaigning built enormous pressure, leading eventually to the 18th Amendment in 1919, banning the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol nationwide. Prohibition.
Wow. So alongside all these structural and safety reforms, you had these really significant movements tackling civil rights and equality. Let's talk about women's suffrage first.
Yeah, a long, long struggle. It really had roots way back in 1848, Seneca Falls. Early suffragists like Susan B. Anthony even tried arguing the 14th Amendment already gave them the vote. Anthony got arrested for trying to vote, actually.
It's interesting that the Western states were the first to grant women suffrage, isn't it?
It is. Places like Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Idaho. Part of it was maybe pragmatic, trying to attract more women settlers, but also that idea of separate spheres for men and women was probably less rigid out west.
And the main national group was NASA.
Right, the National American Woman Suffrage Association, led initially by Stanton and Anthony, then later, crucially, by Carrie Chapman Catt. She made winning suffrage the absolute top priority, even using modern marketing techniques like celebrity endorsements.
But not everyone thought NASA was moving fast enough.
Exactly. Alice Paul was one of them. She'd seen more radical tactics in Britain and felt NASA was too cautious. So she formed the National Woman's Party, the NWP, in 1913.
And they were much more confrontational.
Oh, yeah. Think direct action. Her group, the Silent Sentinels, started picketing the White House in 1917, just standing there silently with banners.
During World War I.
Right in the middle of it. Which was controversial. They were arrested, jailed, and when they went on hunger strike, they were brutally force-fed.
That sounds horrific.
It was scandalous, and it deeply embarrassed President Wilson, trying to fight a war for democracy abroad while women demanding democracy at home were being treated like this. It really pushed him to finally support a federal suffrage amendment.
So it was a combination of NALO's steady pressure and the NWP's more radical tactics.
Precisely. That combined pressure finally got Congress to pass the 19th Amendment in 1919. It prohibited denying the vote based on sex. Ratified in August 1920, a monumental victory.
We should probably mention, though, that there was opposition, the anti-suffragists.
Absolutely. They used postcards, cartoons, trying to ridicule suffragists, portrayed them as unfeminine, irresponsible, neglectful of their homes, or just plain ugly. They argued women's influence was better used outside the dirty world of politics.
Okay, so that's the women's suffrage movement. What about African-American civil rights during this same period?
Also incredibly important, and marked by a really significant debate between two major leaders, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois.
Two very different approaches, right?
Very different. Booker T. Washington, born into slavery, who became head of the Tuskegee Institute, gave this famous speech in 1895, the Atlanta Compromise.
What was his message?
He urged Black Americans to focus first on economic self-sufficiency, learning trades, working hard, building businesses, proving their economic value. He believed that demonstrating responsibility and achieving prosperity would eventually lead white Southerners to grant political and civil rights. Accommodation, essentially.
And how was that received?
It was popular with many white leaders, North and South, and also resonated with some parts of the Black community who saw it as a practical path forward in a very hostile environment.
But W.E.B. Du Bois disagreed.
Strongly. Du Bois, a Harvard-educated scholar, found Washington's approach too passive, too accepting of segregation and inequality. He argued for immediate agitation for full political, civil, and social rights, the rights guaranteed by the Constitution.
He wasn't willing to wait.
Not at all. He helped start the Niagara Movement in 1905, demanding immediate equality. He talked about the need for a talented 10th and educated Black elite to lead the fight for rights.
And this led to the NAACP.
The Niagara Movement was a direct forerunner of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, founded in 1909. Du Bois became its director of publications, editing its influential magazine, The Crisis.
It's really striking, isn't it? Two powerful leaders, both dedicated to racial uplift, but with such fundamentally different strategies laid out so early on. What do you think was the biggest long-term consequence of having those two paths?
That's a great question. I think the biggest consequence is that their debate framed the central strategic tension within the civil rights movement for decades to come. Do you prioritize economic advancement first, hoping rights will follow? Or do you demand political and legal equality immediately, believing that's the foundation for everything else? Both strategies had successes, both had limitations, and that fundamental question echoed through the generations.
Yeah, you can really see the seeds of future debates there. Okay, so we've seen progressivism bubbling up from the grassroots, in cities and states, through social movements. But to tackle the really big national issues, like the power of giant corporations, you needed the federal government, right? You needed the presidency.
Absolutely, and that leadership arrived, maybe somewhat unexpectedly, with Theodore Roosevelt.
TR. He wasn't elected initially, was he?
No, he was vice president and took office in 1901 after President McKinley was assassinated, youngest president ever at the time. And he really brought a new energy, a progressive energy, to the White House.
He quickly got that trust buster nickname.
He did. He wasn't against big business entirely, but he believed government needed to regulate it. He revived the Sherman Antitrust Act. His administration went after the Northern Securities Trust, a huge railroad monopoly, and won in the Supreme Court.
But he made distinctions. Not all trusts were bad in his view.
Right. He talked about good trusts and bad trusts. He used the presidency as a bully pulpit, he called it, to publicly denounce corporate abuses and rally public opinion.
And his square deal wasn't just about trusts, was it? Public health was a big part, too.
Huge. Especially after he read Upton Sinclair's novel, The Jungle.
The expose of the meatpacking industry.
Yeah. It was fiction, but based on Sinclair's investigations. The descriptions of unsanitary conditions, contaminated meat. It horrified Roosevelt and the public.
He famously said something about aiming for the heart but hitting the stomach.
That was Sinclair. He said, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident I hit it in the stomach." People were more outraged about the food safety than the worker exploitation, which frustrated Sinclair. But TR seized the moment.
Leading to new laws.
Directly. The Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act, both in 1906, required inspections, required labels, prohibited adulterated food and drugs, foundational consumer protection laws.
And he was also a big conservationist.
Lifelong outdoorsman. He appointed Gifford Pinchot to head the new U.S. Forestry Service. Together, they massively expanded national forests, added something like 230 million acres, created national parks, wildlife preserves, really laid the groundwork for federal conservation efforts.
Okay, so TR sets a strong progressive tone. Then he basically handpicks his successor, William Howard Taft. How did Taft do?
Well, Taft actually busted more trusts than Roosevelt did, doubled the number of antitrust suits, and he signed laws strengthening railroad regulation.
So he continued the progressive agenda.
In some ways, yes, but he managed to alienate a lot of progressives. He signed the Payne-Aldrich Act, which ended up raising tariffs on many goods. Progressives wanted lower tariffs.
Okay, that wouldn't go over well.
And then he got into a public fight over conservation policy with Gifford Pinchot, TR's guy, and ended up firing Pinchot. That really angered Roosevelt. TR started calling Taft things like a fathead and a puzzlewit.
Not exactly friendly terms.
No, the friendship was over. And this split set up this incredibly dramatic presidential election in 1912.
The one with 3 major candidates.
4, really, if you count the socialist candidate, Eugene Debs. But yeah, the main contest. TR was so angry with Taft that he challenged him for the Republican nomination. When the party bosses stuck with Taft, TR stormed out.
And started his own party.
Yep. The Progressive Party, nicknamed the Bull Moose Party. Supposedly after TR was shot in an assassination attempt, but insisted on giving his speech anyway, declaring, "It takes more than a bullet to kill a bull moose."
Wow. So you have Taft the Republican, Roosevelt the bull moose progressive.
Splitting the Republican vote right down the middle, which opened the door wide for the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson.
Who was also progressive. Governor of New Jersey.
Very much so. So you had three candidates, all claiming the progressive mantle, but with different ideas. Wilson ran on his New Freedom platform, emphasizing smaller government, breaking up monopolies to restore competition. Roosevelt had his New Nationalism, arguing for a powerful federal government to regulate big business and ensure social welfare.
Wilson won because the Republicans were split.
Wilson won decisively in the Electoral College, even though he didn't get a majority of the popular vote.
So Wilson takes office. What were the key achievements of his New Freedom?
He moved quickly. In 1913, the Underwood Tariff Act significantly lowered tariffs for the first time in decades. And critically, to make up for the lost revenue, it included a graduated federal income tax, which was now possible because of the newly ratified 16th Amendment.
The income tax arrives. What else?
A really big one was the Federal Reserve Act, late 1913. This completely reorganized the nation's banking system. It created the Federal Reserve Board, the Fed, with regional reserve banks.
The system we still have today.
Essentially, yes. It aimed to provide stability, regulate banks, control the money supply by setting the discount rate, the interest rate for banks borrowing from the Fed, a cornerstone of modern American finance.
Anything else major? Antitrust.
Yep, the Clayton Antitrust Act in 1914. It strengthened the Sherman Act, spelled out specific illegal business practices, and importantly, exempted labor unions from being prosecuted as trusts.
So Wilson delivered quite a bit of progressive legislation.
He did, especially in his first term. And then heading into his 1916 re-election campaign, he pushed through even more. Aid for farmers, the Keating-Owen Child Labor Act, though later overturned, an 8-hour day for railroad workers. He even appointed Louis Brandeis, a known progressive lawyer, as the first Jewish Supreme Court justice.
It seems like progressivism was really hitting its stride under Wilson. What happened? Why did the era kind of wind down around 1920?
Well, the biggest factor, connecting it all to the bigger picture, was World War I. The U.S. entered the war in 1917, and suddenly, national priorities shifted dramatically. Everything became about the war effort, mobilization, patriotism, national security. Domestic reform just took a backseat.
The war overshadowed everything else.
Completely. The focus shifted outward, and that intense period of domestic progressive reform largely came to an end.
What an incredible period, though. When you step back and look at everything we've just talked about, from the muckrakers digging up truths to presidents wielding federal power that fight for the vote, safer workplaces, cleaner cities, a new banking system, the sheer scope is just immense.
It really is profound. And it brings us back to that lasting legacy. It really does raise that question. Just think about how many things you encounter daily that have direct roots in this era.
Like electing senators.
Or the safety labels on your food.
How banks operate.
The fact that young children aren't legally working in factories. So much of the basic structure of modern American society, its regulations, its political processes, was forged in these progressive battles over a century ago.
They're not just history lessons, they're embedded in our lives.
Exactly, woven right into the fabric.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Thinking about today's challenges, what issues out there now, if they were tackled with that same kind of progressive spirit? You know, that mix of deep investigation, passionate activism from the ground up, and principled leadership, what unforeseen transformations might that bring for future generations?
It's a powerful idea to consider, isn't it? What could that spirit achieve today?